Welcome to the first edition of the Berlin Tech Leads. We're going fully digital this time, but we're hoping to do our next session in June as a hybrid format. So you can join online, you can join in person. I think it's going to be at the Vinted offices over in Mitte. You can come in and check those things out. We're renovating them at the moment and making them even better. So what is this? This is a meetup group for various technical leaders, obviously, or people who would like to be technical leaders, tech leads, engineering managers, directors, you name it, staff engineers, senior engineers. Our objective is to share our experiences and learn from each other. And when we say share our experience, we mean like learning from the ways that other people have screwed up so we don't have to make the same mistakes. What has been popular in Vilnius, where Vinted is headquartered for quite some time now, will also come to Berlin. You know, this kind of thing has been popular in Vilnius, and it's coming to Berlin, and we're going to do more of it. We at Vinted and we at TIR and we, you know, at every organization, I think in this world, believe that leadership is something that you'll learn. It's not something you're born with, but all leaders are born, and you were too. So you can be a leader too, even if you're not in that role right now. Each of our meetups have a specific topic, and this one is about facilitating communities. So we all work on problems that are bigger than just ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't have companies. Whether it's technical challenges so complex that no one person can tackle them, or coordinating the work of groups of people and making sure it can be done, or making a step change in our team's abilities, we really can't do it alone. So facilitating communities is all about creating a vision for the new normal of our environment, and then helping people move towards its realization by activating them, by getting them to want to help to do that. Oftentimes, the first step is activating and energizing your colleagues to even join you in the effort. So you have to be able to describe it to them. And the three people that we have on deck today will be doing just that, about things that they're passionate about. We have Joe, we have Sarah, we have Nuno. And after we have the presentations for each individual speaker, we'll have a short Q&A. So if you have any questions, drop them in that YouTube comment over on the side, and I will check on that. And when the time comes for questions, I will ask them to our speakers, and they will give us their answers. So first on deck is Joe, but before we get to her, like, quick question. Whose native language isn't English? Raise your hands at home, play it all. Have you had trouble using apps because they assume that you are a native English speaker, for example? Or what about cognitive impairments? Like myself, I'm dyslexic, and some apps and sites are really tough for me to use. Our first speaker, Joe Will, an engineering manager from Vinted, one of the teams that I was building and helping to make go forwards. Joe's going to talk about quality and how having a diverse team and empowering them to leverage their experiences can help them improve more than just your user's accessibility experience or the way that one type of user might use the website. In fact, there's much more user delight to be uncovered by including and empowering people of diverse backgrounds in your team and building out our dimensions of quality at the beginning, you know, the shift left stuff. So take it away, Joe. Joe Will, Vinted.
All right, thanks, Adam. So as mentioned, I will be talking about quality, and maybe just a little disclaimer. I pulled this together really quickly, so be kind with the questions. It's not all polished, but I hope it's still comprehensible and fun. So quality included. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Joe. I work at Vinted. I recently joined. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think there's a link in the meetup. And let's just jump right into the topic. So I'm going to be talking about three different topics, let's put it this way. So first of all, what is quality, right? So we need to come up with a definition of what it is. How is it connected to diversity? And then the last bit will be about how do we build quality into our products with regards to diversity and what DI in general. All right, so I've been using this definition that I found years ago, and I can't even tell you who said it. I tried to find out and I couldn't. That I quite like. It's a very general definition of what quality is. So quality is the ability of a product or service to consistently meet or exceed customer expectations. I think it's a really nice one. It focuses on the customer or the user, not just on, so it's like fitness of use and purpose, which I think is still true, right? We want to excite the user. We want to solve a problem that the user has. So what does it mean? So the first thing that comes to mind that usually we look out for is functionality, right? There's a certain functionality I implement or provide, and then we check that it does what it's supposed to do. But there's other attributes that are usually considered. So here's just a selection of what we usually call quality attributes. And so, for example, we have the classic ones, right? Performance, availability, privacy is really big right now. Authorization, like lots of attributes that can be important for a product, right? That need to be considered upfront. And users have certain expectations around this, right? They won't tell you that they expect your, let's say, website to load in milliseconds. They just expect that, right? Or that it's always available when they need it. It's just expected, or that we keep the data safe. But nowadays it's important to look even beyond these quality attributes that we have at what the product, not only what the product can bring to our users, but also to society as a whole, right? So tech can change people's lives, right? For the better or for the worse. And I believe it's our job to change it for the better, right? So even tackle climate change or gender equality as an example, right? Or even like participate in like fighting against, helping with the war that is going on in the Ukraine. Like so many things that we can tackle, and we have a responsibility as technologists. And maybe to connect this to just the global issues, like this is a global thing, right? Like the UN defined the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Like all of these issues can be important for us as well as technologists, right? Depending on what we build, what kind of service or product we build, right? Like tackling gender equality or inequality in that regard, making sure we use our resources in a smart way, right? So there's this, what is it called? I forgot what it's called. It's green development, I think, green software development or something like that. So it's like being very conscious about how your carbon footprint. Like, is your stuff in a cloud or not in a data center? Because you can manage this much better if you have multiple companies in the cloud. So all of these things are becoming important, right, for us as well. So let me go for one slide. So I hope that people actually have seen this before, the Kano model and I think so. There is certain expectations that users have, like the basic expectations. They're usually unspoken. They're just like, as I was saying before, like they just expect the page to be available of the app and to be fast, right? No one will even talk about this. This is just like basic expectation. Like it has to be there, right? Then you have satisfiers, like stuff that people actually, that's the stuff that they want, right? The basic expectation, like it must be there. Satisfiers, like, yeah, I want this. And then I think, and then there is also delighters, things that actually like set you apart from the competition. And I believe right now we still have a chance to use efforts in sustainable development and the whole concept of social responsibility as a delighter, saying like, hey, we're different than others, right? Over time, I really hope that this moves down to like just basic expectation that we shouldn't, that shouldn't be a special thing, that we care about the planet and other people and equality. But right now, it is something that is still new in technology. And it is really important because people look for it already, right? Like, is this a vegan product? Does it kill the planet? Like, you can be different. And we should consider this in our strategies, right? So I would propose, and I know I'm not the only one, to include sustainable development factors as part of as a quality attribute, right? And saying like, this should be part of my strategy. Like, I should consider this upfront, right? And not as an afterthought. Right. Because, as I said before, software is an intrinsic part of society, and we have this responsibility, the social responsibility to make the world a better place, right? Not just make money for someone. Technology is so powerful. Like, we create products that touch millions or billions of lives. Like, we can literally change society if we wanted to, just by removing a checkbox or adding another one, right? The way that people like do banking or whatever we do, mobility, right? We can change that, even to the degree to social engineering, which is a dangerous field, but we have that power to change it. And I think, like, like to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So my proposal is to add these as new quality attributes to our strategies. And I want to throw in a few examples of what happens why we should be doing this, what happens if we don't do this. Let me go on the next slide. So just as a disclaimer, so software, as we all know, is built by people, right? And it's built for people, generally. So it is important that our teams consist of people that actually represent our users or know a lot about our users. So the best way to do this is have very diverse teams, which has also lots of other benefits, right? You have lots of insights about different lifestyles or backgrounds. You have different problem-solving skills. You have more innovation just because you have more points of view. And I think I really love the Anais Nin quote, which I think sums it up really, really well, right? Because we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So if we are this homogeneous group of people with groupthink, then we will only produce things that match our little world, right? So to illustrate this, I love the statistic, and it hasn't really changed this much as far as I know. I tried to find some more recent numbers, but they don't look that much better, right? So yeah, products are largely built by young white dudes, right? They don't represent the rest of the world, right? And what happens when we only let a certain group of people develop products, we end up with things like this. I don't know if anyone remembers the pinky gloves. Two guys coming up with this brilliant idea of the pinky glove, a bright pink, a disposable glove that you can wear to, get rid of tampons discreetly, and that turns into a bag, the little glove. And that was massive backlash, right, online, because obviously it's completely unnecessary. It's not environmentally friendly at all, right? And it's not even financially responsible, because it's much more expensive than if you buy your own gloves, if you choose to use them, right? It's not a problem that women generally had, right? So two guys came up with this. Another guy invested in this. Like, it went on like the German version of Shark Tank. I think was Höhle der Löwen. Got like 30K, but in the end, there was so much backlash that it just shut down. So don't be these guys, right? And just because it's fun, I have a few more examples. Like, I could do a whole presentation just with examples with this biased software. I'm sure everybody knows one or two. There is the famous Google Photos that identified people of color as gorillas, right? Not cool. Various fitness bands that don't work if your skin is not purely white, right? That even includes people with tattoos. So it's not even a racial issue, right? It's just like if your color is a different, your skin is a different color in that place, right? The CEO auto suggestion, like the emoji that is always a man and not a woman. And I particularly love the Nikon that asks the Asian woman if she blinked. Like there's so many examples of epic fails, right? And it doesn't have to be a small little startup like the Pinky Gloves. It can be like really big companies that fuck up as well. So the point I'm trying to make is there is these might seem like extreme examples, like, oh my God, I forgot something really big, but it's all in like, it's everywhere. Like diversity is everywhere, right? In everyday life, we're all different in so many different ways. Like someone might be left-handed, someone is short, someone is older, someone is colorblind, someone is not straight, not white. Like all of these different aspects like come into play when we create products, right? I particularly love this little graphic that I stole from Microsoft because it opens it up, right? So it's not just like an edge case, like, oh, we should not develop something that is for people with only one arm, right? Like who would use our app with just one hand? Like who has just one arm? Like it's much more than that. It's people who temporarily who might have broken their arm or just holding something. So it might be a much larger group than we initially think. Like how many people are blind and use our software? Like maybe they're not blind, but maybe they're just distracted because they're driving and they cannot look at the screen all the time. So all of a sudden we're talking not about like 1%, but 80, right? So, and it's the more people we have in our teams that bring different points of view and different abilities and experiences, the better our products will be. Right? Like I worked on 2 projects with 2 different people who were colorblind, and it really literally opened my eyes to the fact that the Kibana board I built with like red and green as indicators whether it's broken or not was not a good idea for someone who's had red-green colorblind. Like they couldn't tell the difference. Right? And I didn't find a way to change the colors in Kibana. So we had to be really creative to find another like visual clue for them, like, hey, the build is broken. Go and fix it. Or too many errors. I don't remember what it was, but it was a red-green problem. So the more we expose to these kind of differences, the better products we build in the end. That's just like the summary, like why should we care? Because if we have people who don't care about these like DEI, like diversity, equity and inclusion issues, or like who don't care about equality, then they won't fix it. Right? If this is not part of your worldview, you won't address it. So we have to make sure it's part of the team's view. And how do we do this? I think we have to focus on 3 different things: who builds our software, how are we building it, and what are we building? So kind of like for whom are we building this? So the how, I think, is pretty well known at this point. It's agile software development or DevOps and everything that comes with it. That's the way to go, I would say, because it delivers fast feedback. It has a cross-skill team, so everyone's kind of involved and talking to each other. You have the shift left movement with the quality. So rather than trying to find problems at the very end, you try to prevent them at the start, right? And of course, you have continuous improvement. That's a really big part of it. There's tons more. I highly recommend reading Accelerate for anyone's interested. It's full of practices. It's not just about the metrics. Actually, the book is mostly about practices. Read that. So that about the how. The what is not just a question for, I think, for designers and product managers. Just like quality is not just the responsibility of a QA. Right? It's everybody's responsible to give feedback and input. We should go and understand our users, get to know them, like test our ideas with different groups. And it doesn't matter how shiny and great our product is, if it doesn't actually make tangible impact in people's lives, it's completely useless, right? So we should actively just go out and talk to people and try and work on interrupting our own biases, right? By calling each other out, like, hey, this is not cool if you do this, or also like calling in, like telling people, like sharing experiences. go and do that. And that only works if you have a diverse team, right? Which is my last actually point, which should obviously come first, right? You start with the team, the people who build it. So start with diverse and inclusive teams, right? Hire diverse people who I would say like have shared the same core values, but otherwise they can be as different, as colorful as they can be, right? As long as you agree that you want to do no harm, you want to make it a better world, then get people with different age and not just gender, right? I'm so sad if I see companies just go for gender, like, oh yeah, we have 40% women and that's it. But everybody else is 28 or 29, right? There's no diversity apart from gender, and even gender is binary, right? Just like go for diverse, like look for left-handed people, look for tall people, look for people of different religions, different backgrounds, different age. So many factors to diversity, right? That includes like making sure that there's diversity in the job ad when you hire people, right? Don't look for the rock stars, right? That doesn't really address a lot of women. And once you're in the company, like educate people, right? Like make sure you have education in terms of like diversity inclusion as part of the onboarding when new people join, as part of like ongoing training for everyone in the company. Other factors would be like using inclusive language, right? Don't just say like, hey guys, all the time. Right? It's not very, there's other words you can use. You can use folks and peeps, and Adam was using this, like the binary, like, what was it? Guys, gals, and binary pals, which is also a classic. Like you can use other words, right? Inclusive language, or just also, like avoid stereotypes like, girls are not very good at this, right? I have two problems with this, but, and of course, again, fight the bias. And the last point is the same as before, is like continuously improve. Right? Question the status quo, like why is this still the right way to do this? Should we continue doing this? Yeah. So to sum up, I would say to build more inclusive products, focus on the who, the how, and the what. Right? The what is like make this part of your strategy. Like we want to build inclusive products. We want to not kill the planet. On the contrary, want to make it better. Right? Want to build a better future. And we already know how to do this. We just have to do it. Like Agile is very established, so is DevOps and Lean and Shift Left. And there is so much literature right now about like the benefits of having inclusive and diverse teams. Like it's a business advantage, but you have better ideas because you have more input. You make more money. I don't think we need a better incentive than that. So, and to finish, I would just remind everyone again, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Joe. Very, very interesting talk. I won't lie, I had a preview of it. I will stick by my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. As a non-binary person myself, that is the only way I can figure out to address everybody in the audience, but maybe just like, you folks, I don't know. We can talk about it over coffee. So questions for Joe. You've shown examples of products that were bad at being inclusive. Do you have examples of good ones?
I did not have time to pull them in. Yes, there are examples. One that I had on a previous presentation that I couldn't find on short notice is I play the ukulele, and there's a lovely website where you can just look up ukulele chords, like how to play them. And there's a teeny tiny like checkbox in the corner. It says flip for lefty. So for people who are left-handed. And I remember like when I saw this, I realized like I never even thought about that people who are left-handed like might play on the other side. Like that's a great example. Like it doesn't ruin my experience of the website in any way. It just enhances it, right? It makes it better for everybody. It's a small little detail, but it changes the world for other people, right? Or just the other example is I love when you have like a shipping address and it doesn't ask me for my salutation like Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Because I mean, the mail gets to me either way, right? They don't need to know how I identify just to get me a package, right? They don't even need my first name. So there's lots of good examples.
Have you been reading the chat? Because that conversation has actually been going on in the chat right now. So yeah, we're talking about the salutations, like, is it a tradition? Do we need that? But I suppose for some people, they're very important. And if that's your user base and your goal as a company is to make money, you might have to consider that. But maybe you can move the needle a little bit further on. And so I believe that we are out of time for questions and answers. We had one there from the audience. I would love to see 2. Your goal is 2 for Nuno, because he's coming up. Nuno Simaria, he's the chief technologist at Slow Growth. He's going to give us his vision for the role of software makers. Nuno will share his thoughts on the role of software makers building successful tech organizations that make a positive impact on communities and society. So Nuno, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Joe, also for the great talk. Yeah, so I assume that the audience is in the business, or most of the audience is in the business of making software, whether you are software engineers yourselves, product managers, designers, you work with quality, you work with security, infrastructure. There's a high likelihood, if you're watching this, that you're somehow involved in the process of making software. And one second. And it's a good time to be making software. Over the last decades, we have seen how companies have become either tech-enabled companies or dead companies, in the sense that the competitive game today is to be the company that best leverages technology to grow and to accelerate their own business model. And long ago have, companies that have resisted this trend have gone, bankrupt. So it's important to know that also to understand that companies specifically have embraced iterative software development as the main vehicle for hypergrowth. So what we end up doing as companies is that we hire hundreds of people like us, software makers, cross our fingers and hope for hypergrowth. The ongoing scarcity of our time, of people like us, people with our skill set, has made it that development capacity is actually an extremely valuable raw material that every company wants to invest in the hopes that what comes out of that, so engineering capacity goes in and growth to profitability comes out. However, as software makers, it's I would say that our understanding so far of how to reliably and predictably build high quality software, and really high quality as defined by Joe. I really liked your definition there. So our understanding of how to do that predictably and deliberately is actually, I would say, quite flawed. I think over the last decades as well, within our own separate skill sets, within our own technologies and our own step of the software making process, we have leaped forward many times. If you look at infrastructure, we went from hosting in bare metal to serverless. With 4 or 5 leaps in the middle. Any programming language is so much more sophisticated nowadays. Great developer tooling, great designing tools, etc., etc. However, we are not as advanced, I would argue, in the discipline of how we work and how we organize ourselves as a team to deliver impact to the customer's company, but also to our community of software makers and to the society as a whole. Even though, ironically, building software, and we know that very well, is a team sport. there's very little, no matter what we sometimes think, there's very little that one individual contributor can do in a sizable organization. So today I'd like to talk a little bit of what I believe is the role of software makers in organizations, within our own community and society. And in each of these spheres of influence, try to offer, hopefully, an advice to kind of take us one step beyond where we are at the moment. Before I go into our contribution, what is our role in organizations, I would like to take a moment to profile what is it that we should strive for. What is a high-performing technology organization? And of course, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to generalize here. Bear with me. This is a very simplified view into what a high-performing organization is. But there's sorry about that. Technology hasn't worked. That is not working that well. So high-performing organizations basically have three traits. To start with, they're founded upon a generative culture, and that's the term used by a sociologist called Ron Westrom, and that Google picked up on it, as well as many other tech organizations, and have basically built themselves mirroring these organizational traits, which involve having small cross-functional teams that have deep domain expertise. And I would like here to refer that a cross-functional team, it's not just, and also alluding back to Joe's presentation, cross-functional team is not just a back-end engineer and a front-end engineer and adding a designer to that. Cross-functional team requires a deep knowledge of the whole value chain that is owned by that team. That means, for instance, if you have a checkout team that takes care of your checkout funnel, that team should have a deep understanding of marketing and potentially, having a marketeer in it. So it's not just about technical cross-functionality, but also about basically being able to own the problem as a whole. These teams usually have end-to-end ownership, and they operate within a well-bounded context. They are usually highly autonomous in their daily operations, meaning they don't need to check in with other teams that often. They don't need to depend on other teams. At the same time, these teams are together and kind of independently working and in alignment towards common goals. Also, across these teams, there's a shared sense of purpose and a shared sense of urgency around what are the important topics of the day, of the month, and what should be the relative priorities of each person or of each team. Secondly, a high-performing team is, of course, a high-performing company is a company that has a high impact, of course. And this is, there's usually common to these organizations a deliberate obsession about metrics, about tracking the right metrics, knowing that depending the metrics that you track condition the behaviors within the organization and of the teams. Usually these metrics are also actionable, and they inform autonomy of the team and they confirm alignment. What this means is that, for instance, there's one metric that owns one team, that is owned by one team. And basically from the outside, you can, by looking at how that metric is trending, understand, is the team contributing or is the team operating well, as well as the team knows that as long as, the goals are being accomplished for the company, their autonomy is being put to a good use. Ultimately, so there's techniques like tracking, experimentation, data mining play a huge role. And the reason why that is, it's because the goal of these organizations is to sustain a steep learning curve about their business model continuously, about their customers, about their business opportunities. So they force themselves to deliberately continuously learn about the problem that they're trying to solve. And lastly, of course, these organizations are highly efficient. And this was a nut that was a little bit hard for us to crack as software makers. Initially, because a cost-efficient approach is not a valid approach when it comes to technology teams. We now know, based on research like the one that is exposed on the Accelerate book and others, and by people that have done this many, many more times than any of us here today, that these so-called DORA metrics actually point to really good traits and really describe well just the efficiency of a team that is building a software product. These metrics are not your holy grail, in my view. They won't, in themselves, won't save you from disaster, but they are extremely actionable and they are easily enriched with your own process data, so you can derive, the right insights and make the right changes to your operations so that you can keep being more and more efficient. The really good thing, I think, about these metrics is that they allow us to compare experiences across different teams and even across different organizations. Something that very crude tools like story points will never allow you to do. So knowing that this is what a high-performing organization looks like, we can start from there, kind of reverse engineer it to figure out what is our role as a software maker in a modern organization. And we can pick it up by following these three things: generative culture, high impact, and high efficiency. So when it comes to generative culture, our job as software makers is to actually take the lead in fostering the culture that we thrive on. And being mindful of the non-practitioners, of the non-technologists around us and our colleagues that should be onboarded in these practices also with empathy. It is not about cross-functionality. Again, should not be practiced just within your tech department. It should really go beyond any department lines within your organization and should focus on just end-to-end, the necessary skill sets to own end-to-end one specific business problem. We know how to set up that culture. We know what that culture looks like better than others that don't practice it. So we should take the lead, and we need to make ourselves, responsible for the cultures around us. To drive impact, we need to understand how our technical work connects to its end impact. And we need to realize that not all, like somebody said to me once, not all tech debt is created alike. There's tech debt that is extremely costly to your organization. There's a lot of tech debt that you can just leave behind. One engineer not liking how one script file looks is not a good reason to start a refactoring. But a customer complaint, a quality issue, may be. Lastly, to drive efficiency, focusing on just the core behaviors that DORA metrics incentivize you, which have to do with just keeping changes small, deploying them immediately or as soon as possible, fix issues early, and don't let them pile up. Those are, I think, really good rules of thumb. So to start with, role of the software maker within our organizations is to drive organizations to high performance. And in order to do that, we need to really understand first, what is it? How is it that we get there? And really think about it cross-functionally, be aware that you are working in a team and that you need to contribute to be team aware, right? Within the software community, the software making community, I think it's important that we reframe what good looks like and that we set aside academic discussions and really analyze our practices skeptically and to discover what truly drives high performance. Microservices versus monoliths, writing tests before or after you write code, those discussions don't really matter, or in a vacuum are not valuable discussions if you don't put them in the context of, has it improved delivery frequency of the team? Has that practice been the right practice to solve that problem? They're just outside of that context. They're purely academical discussions. They have merit in them as academical discussions. For example, and a clear example that I see many times, breaking down sizable work into small chunks is as important, and I would argue a lot more important, than software design patterns. And the problem is that actually breaking down work requires a very mature team, requires a team effort and team synchronization. And that's something that actually software design patterns don't. You can just, in isolation, you can look at something and see if it fits the pattern or not. But breaking down work into sizable chunks is a lot more important, contributes a lot more to high performance, I would argue, than just, correct software development patterns. So developing our team awareness as much as we have developed our core skills is key, and really focus on the outcomes of the practices that we are debating about. So within our community, the role of the software maker at this point, I would argue, is to reframe what good looks like. And then going beyond the society, for all of the reasons that you've heard Joe talking about, and also for these reasons, the fact that we have a disproportionate amount of value on the companies that we work for. And we know that because we see how our salaries have progressed over the last decades. We see how the job market is ever blowing in our favor. The reason is because companies have realized that, technology is driving hypergrowth, or at least it's sustaining it in the long term. So we also, that disproportionate value add makes us disproportionately executive agents of company impact. So it is important that we understand what problems we're working on and what is the end impact. It's important that we act as impactful citizens. Joe showed a much better slide on our global backlog and all of the problems that are yet to be solved, if we choose to do so, if we choose to go and work for the companies that are trying to solve them. So work on backlogs in order to be a good mindful citizen, work on backlogs that are value adding for your companies as well as society. Teach and mentor others into technology careers. Diversity in technology won't happen without us getting off our chairs and going and teach people that wouldn't usually have the chance to get taught technology. That's something that, in my experience, less people do that than they complain about the lack of diversity. Educate audiences about this responsibility of software makers, hold software makers accountable to that responsibility, and ultimately decide, what will the hypergrowth that you enable do? Will it just, pursue maximization of profits, or will actually lay the ground for a better tomorrow? So in society, our role would be to own up to this role of being an impactful citizen. I wrote this rant also in the latest article on slowgrowth.com. There's references, don't take any of the things that I said because I said them. I tried to get some literature together. You can find it also in the article. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. So thank you, Nuno.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a heck of a coffee later. I like 90% of what you say. There's another 10% that you're going to have to convince me.
We need to talk about.
Yeah, we need to talk about. But we have questions from the audience which are more important. So from Rafael, in your experience, what are the most common mistakes teams make in the process of becoming high performance?
Looking internally for the path to high performance, I think that we do a lot of introspection about our own practices, but rarely do we look at our participation in the company as part of a bigger whole. And very often I like using this word, we otherize ourselves from the business community in our companies. So actually the path to high performance is to go out and have a coffee with, if you're working for finance, let's say you work on a payments team, it's go out and have coffee with the auditor that has to, the internal auditor that has to present the output of your systems to auditors, which is a really big stakeholder. And, to be honest, that's not something we do enough. So that would be one example where I think it's a common mistake that I see teams doing it. And I've made it myself many, many times where we don't look enough into, outside of the team.
Gotcha. So we may be goal-seeking meat machines, but we're working in a socio-cultural organization. So we need to remember to grease the wheels there with really having compassion and empathy for each other, understanding each other and talking to one another. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point? We all just might just work in our own little silo.
Exactly. Maybe another one is that we don't necessarily allow the other people to set the expectations for what good is in our jobs. We're all very proud of, look how well linted this file is, right? But, coming across and saying my stakeholder is happy with the demo, that is so much more fulfilling and impactful. Yeah,
I would say, I would even go further. I would say that's the only thing that's important.
Yeah, exactly.
User stuff, the people that benefit from the value, software engineers, business people.
Absolutely.
That's what's important. Otherwise, we're just making ourselves happy, and man, that gets old real quick.
Absolutely.
Got another question from Dorian. What about bigger architectural decisions? Like, how do we decide on something that has mid to long-term benefits? I've heard this one from staff engineers too. It's like, but we can't just do part of this. It's either all or nothing. We got to implement. We got to stand up new servers. We got to do there's elements of the system that need to exist. We can break this down into something smaller.
I don't buy that. That is, I think, us making a problem out of, we want to do it one way, and we are not accepting a condition that is an important condition for business, which is we cannot go 2 months without adding more value to our platform. We can't ask for a feature freeze. No company in its sane mind would allow a feature freeze in any of their tools if they're making money from it. And we, I think, need to realize that there are certain things that we need to work around. So architectural changes should never be done on a big bang. If you're a good architect, you'll know that there's high risk in doing that. And so that also better people than me have already demonstrated that, you can make big changes in architecture iteratively, step by step. Many companies have done that. They keep doing that. Yeah.
One other thing that we agree on. Great. So this is going to be a nice, fun coffee. We have another question from Sylvia. Can you share an experience on developing or increasing a sense of urgency with the engineering team? Well, like, this is not just a charity for nerds. How do we make this thing work?
Yeah, sure. I have a great example. Email templating is usually something that is boring to do for an engineer. Because it's hard to debug, it's messy, it's old HTML and all that. But I found that actually just taking the time to explain to the engineer how many people will get that email, how many people will click on the button, and what it means to the business, if we're talking about like an important sales email, how much it means to the business, an uplift into the clicking of that button. Usually like 95%, I would say, of the engineers that I've had this conversation with will go happily put their headphones on and just eat up HTML4, old HTML, because it's fun, because then it has an impact and it becomes much more interesting. Yeah, so go beyond the technical challenge, really think about the end challenge. I think we resonate with that when somebody paints a picture for us. I think that helps.
Yeah, that picture painting is important. I think you'll agree with me when I say, like, it's leadership. It's showing people where we want to go. I think if you feel like it's manipulation, it probably is, and you should stop. But if you can authentically believe that these things are true, and you can see the value, it's all about, as engineering leaders, communicating this to people, showing them, aligning them to that. Because when people are aligned, the execution is almost an afterthought in a lot of cases when things are performed. People. Yeah, I like that. I like that illustration of the email forms.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's the last question we have, and we are going to move on to Sarah. So last but definitely not least is Sarah Abrantes. She's the VP of Engineering at Tier Mobility. You've all seen the scooters, and talks about there and back again, from moving to the cloud to living on the edge. So this is going to have lots of Lord of the Rings things peppered through it. And if not, I'm going to be very disappointed, Sarah. Take back my offer of coffee. So Sarah, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'm really hoping to not disappoint you today. So first and foremost, thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here today, sharing some ideas with you. My name is Sarah. A little bit about myself, I'm Brazilian, got a little kid, 5 years old. She's going into kindergarten this year. This is one of my biggest adventures, besides everything else that I'm doing at Tier, of course. After Brazil, I moved to Lisbon, where I worked in a small startup, and then I came to Berlin. It's been about 7 years. I had the opportunity to work on some cool unicorns, such as Gawiro and 26, Get Your Guide. I see already in the chat a couple of known names, so nice that you're here. Thank you. And since a year, I am a VP of Engineering at Air Mobility, and I'm responsible for a few teams over there. Infrastructure with our DevOps and SREs, developer experience, creating SDKs for other developers, corporate and product security, building policies, ensuring proper access to several resources in the organization, coordinating pen tests, helping the developers to be aware of threats during their software development, and also some core services also called platform. So we have the payments platform, the geodata platform, the fleet integration platform, the edge computing platform. And the last one is actually the one that inspired this talk today. But I'm going to start talking about how it all started for me in this context. My professional journey starts actually in a city called Recife 20 years ago. And well, about that, I still have like 1 or 2 years to complete the 20, and I'll be proud of those. That's not my age. Back then, I had the pleasure to work in a well-renowned R&D company, which was a dream job for everyone in computer science back then in my city. And amongst other areas, they worked with a key mobile players such as Nokia, Motorola, Samsung. And most of my time there, I worked on Motorola projects. I started as a developer, and this is one of the first models that I developed for. There were some functional apps, some games as well. And this, for those who don't recognize this weird thing, is a mobile phone. It's a Motorola i570 Nextel Iden. Lots of names. Nextel was a wireless service operator that was later bought by T-Mobile. Hooray, finally a known name. And one of their innovations was Iden. It was a telecom network that mixed radio and cellular technology. What do I mean with radio and cellular? Have you ever heard about PTT? Yes, because you game and you have heard about it. Push to talk. It's like your phone is not just a phone, but it's also a walkie-talkie. When I tell these stories, often I get the question, but why? So you need to also take the times into consideration. And back then we are talking about expensive mobile plans, paying per SMS message, very limited multimedia options to send messages and this kind of things that are today like just common things. And this phone was heavily advertised to a small business that require instant communication. And why not have your manager being able to just reach you from a walkie-talkie, right? Sounds lovely. But there were also some other interesting projects back then. And bear with me on the technologies that I'm talking about, right? Around the same time, I was learning more about the concept of RIA, that's how we called them back then, or RIA, bear with my English, Rich Internet Applications. And I worked on a project to create an application for Embraer. For those who don't know Embraer, oh my God, this is our Brazilian Boeing. And they sell legacy jets besides other stuff. And it was really cool because you could customize almost everything in a jet for you to buy a jet. You can put a kitchen, you can put a sofa, you can put chairs, table, customized materials, as well as painting the outside. So there was also an integration that allowed you to have a 3D perspective of the aircraft interior as you added the furniture, like how does it look like when I enter my own private jet? And a fairly good portion of the logic of what you can do and cannot do was all in the app. It needed to work everything offline. And I feel like at this point, I was making a huge contribution to history and carbon footprint. But look at this, Jackie Chan's personal legacy jet with a cool dragon, his name on it. And as I mentioned, just to give you one idea, you could choose like, I want chairs, I want a sofa, I want a cupboard, like how do I want my own jet? Back then, I tried to convince my manager that I didn't need a salary for this project. I'd be happily getting one of those jets for me. I could also get the basic one, no personalization. Didn't fly, as you might see. But yeah, no, I haven't got one, but it was super cool to make this. Now, moving forward a little bit, then we were still talking about the early 2000s, right? But then we are also starting to go more and more into the cloud. Technology started to become way more accessible, and the entry cost was lower, not only for the customers, but also for developers, for people learning how to develop. People could also learn by themselves. We have tons of self-taught people nowadays, which was not necessarily true when we are talking about 90s, 80s, 70s. Nowadays, we work with, so back then we were working with thin clients, which is also the idea that a lot of applications still have today, centralization of computing. We started to move storage and bulk processing to the cloud as well. The services started to be delivered over the internet, on demand. Companies, they didn't have to start to invest anymore in on-premises data centers. They started to pay for what they use. Scalability started to be way cheaper, easier than what it was before. We entered the DevOps era. And this has been most of my experience, actually. Those are very cool things, but we're a little back in time. But most of my experience, as probably majority of you, was actually in this cloud world. Now, at TIA, almost 20 years later, I am coming back to working on what does it mean to work on the devices that are closer to the user, not necessarily a mobile phone. In this case, I'm talking about the vehicles. And how can we program on the edge? So when I talk about that lovely cell phone that I'm pretty sure everyone's going on eBay now to see how much does it cost, because it's awesome and you're going to buy one for you. Of course, they don't have the computational power that we have nowadays. It's a very different world to think about making computing to program to the edge, to do edge computing. Now I'm also entering this world not necessarily as a programmer anymore. I'm not necessarily coding this, but I'm helping my team to find their path on building this great platform and unlocking all the potential that we have by exploring edge computing at TIA. So currently we have our vehicles connected to the cloud, where the vast majority of processing is done. There are amazing teams behind all these capabilities that we offer. They are all working on amazing features to the cloud. Our vehicles have some synchronous, asynchronous messages. They operate a rental, charging, maintenance, all these things. But what happens when the network is down? What happens if our data provider experiences problems? This is badly reflected on the user experience that we can provide. As Joe was saying before, like there are some basic expectations of work, right? And if this is not working, people are not really concerned if the problem is with TIA or with our data provider or where the problem is. Like in the end, it turns out that it boils down to it's a bad user experience. So things such as starting and finishing rentals, this cannot fail. But also we have rules about zones, parking, slowing down, etc. And all of this, the more they are dependent on an internet connection, the more they risk failure. So this is one very interesting thing. Going to the cloud allowed us to have lots of scalability, as I said, on-demand processing, computational power, etc. But it has also increased a lot latency and our capacity to be really connected and close to our users, right? Not only availability per se, network latency, as I said, but also sometimes data sovereignty. If we don't need to take any data from the scooter to perform certain actions, they never get to reach the cloud, and the risk of actually having data breaches or having any misuse or any incidents with data is lowered because it's also centralized in just in a vehicle to perform the operations that they need to perform. So if we don't have to worry about it, what can we do if we don't have to put everything in the cloud and we actually can do everything in the edge? What about everything? What if we have a platform that's just on the vehicles? And when you create your software, instead of thinking of all this communication from the vehicle to the cloud, to the cloud, to the vehicle, what if you can actually optimize trading for the vehicle? That's very interesting. This is taking me back to my R&D roots with this edge platform, because it's something new in the company. It's something that we've been exploring for a while, finally materializing. We're already working on our first cases, and we are going to have the pilots in the streets still this year. And this makes a very nice connection with something that Nuno was talking about, the cross-functional teams. If I have now a team that's going to be deploying on a vehicle, it needs to be a truly cross-functional team, because now they have to have not only the ability to create the same code that they were creating for the cloud, but they need to be more aware of how it would actually influence the vehicle. We have to be more aware of security. We have to have more DevOps skills when doing this. And this is going to be a very interesting cultural change that we are starting to promote in the company. And I'm very excited about it. Moreover, I think that it's super important when we are talking about this whole movement to paint a picture, also connecting back to what Nuno said. And it's very important to have a goal. And I think that this is one of the things that's getting us way closer to our goal. TIA's mission is to change mobility for good. And this is also one of the things that caught my attention when I was considering joining the company. And as you can see, it worked. We have ambitious goals to influence climate change in a positive way. We have a global challenge to solve. We want to have better alternatives in this era of car dependency. We are not talking about not necessarily taking your car to go to the mountains. We are talking about not having this strong dependency of cars within a city. We need to create a sustainable future where, and this is actually my catchy phrase, so that our kids can play in the streets again. This is how TIA got me. This is how I ended up going there. And this is one of the things that I have in mind when we are actually planning and grooming our backlog. And this is one of the pictures that I have with my team. This is the future that we want. How does this materialize? And I got permission of two of my teammates to share this. These are two scooters being throttled when they enter a certain business zone where they have to slow down. And one is basically doing that, connecting to the cloud, and the other one is doing this on the edge. We have we can provide way more safety to our riders and citizens by exploring this type of technology. And this is the thing that I think it's so inspiring about working with this team and coming back to this technology of working on the edge. Now, pause a little bit for a second here, because there was a lot of things that I said, and let's just connect them a little bit. There were a lot of paradigms and technological evolution in this 20 years. And I can come here today and talk about all of this. I was a developer. I still know people that are still developers. I went my way through management. But how can developers keep themselves relevant? They can keep up with the industry changes. They can connect more with the users. How are your companies investing in innovation? How are they wanting to be different? How bold are they being? Because one thing that I think is super cool, when I thought, okay, we are going to have what Kubernetes clusters and the scooters, what? The US Department of Defense has done it on their F-16s. And of course, if they've done it, we can do this as well. Of course, I think it's just the same, and everyone can actually be innovative and think, how can I actually bring this value closer to my customers? So I'm wondering, I know that some people might have some questions for me, but I'm actually wondering for you, in 10, 15 years, what are you going to be talking about? How did the industry change you and your developers and help reshape and how did you help them reshape and embrace all these changes that we are talking about today? Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. That was, I want to reiterate the question, and I want to get some answers in here for her. How do you think this is going to change 15, 20 years? I just posted something in there. F-16s are older than I am, and I'm old. So like, what is this going to look like? Put on your Imagineering hats. I've got a Maliki, I've got a Dorian, I think I've got a Levy in here too. Raphael, y'all have been talking back and forth. Maybe one of them or somebody new. But in the meantime, I do have a question for Maliki. I'm not sure how serious he is, but I will ask it anyway. Does TIR use MQTT for async communication on the edge? Can you share that information, or is it a trade secret?
Yes and no, and both are true.
That is a definite. You are a senior engineering leader right there. It depends. Yes and no. You know, we have two states at the same time. We're doing it right.
I have someone from my security team over here. I hope not. But yeah, yes, I know.
Thank you for the answer. I have a question personally. And I put it in the channel there. When you're talking about these cross-functional teams and the growth of the capabilities and the depth that you might need to do something significant, I'm all for specializing generalists. But sometimes they're hard to find. You have to, to create them and grow them. You usually find people who are more like generalizing specialists. And in order to get what you're talking about in a team, it sounds like a big team. How do you manage that? How do you enable that team to actually be a true team? Or like maybe the first question is, challenge my assumption, is that a big team? Like how many people is that you're talking about?
No, it's not. So when we are talking about the Edge platform team, we are talking currently about 3 amazing developers.
Oh, okay, cool. That is a very manageable size.
Yeah, but also bear in mind. So I'm talking about a platform, right? So what I'm building is where people will actually deploy their software later on. So what this platform needs to be is, besides all the attributes that are a little bit obvious on security, et cetera, it also needs to be something that is self-onboardable. So this is our goal as well, that every team don't need these developers to come and hold hands and come and please deploy to my platform, but it needs to be self-explanatory, not only with documentations, but also simple, so that people can simply deploy on this. And now every other product team needs to also work on a few new capabilities themselves. We do have core teams, we do have SREs, we do have DevOps, we have security team. They are there to also support, to guide, to also coach, to teach. But everyone, like being a specialist doesn't mean that you don't know anything about anything else. Doesn't mean that you're just good on one thing and then you cannot do any of the things. And because you can do the other things, it also doesn't mean that you're 100% a generalist that's not a specialist on anything, right? There's a little bit of a gray area here. And that's the key point, is people need to understand what they are doing. It's not just, I type this and hooray, it works magically. We need to understand other details.
And I would say to people out there, listen to this person right here. And I'm doing that based on your LinkedIn profile. You go engineering manager, head of engineering. Then you go, senior engineering manager, director of engineering, VP of engineering. Less than a year. You know what you are talking about. What are some, I have another question after this, but like Dorian has a question. What are the challenges of working closer to the hardware? Both from a technical point of view and an organizational point of view. Was it difficult to find and train the right people? What are the right people?
Yes. It is super hard. By the way, we are hiring. just saying. But yeah, it's super hard to find, because first of all, there's this whole, I'll go with the word generalist, or for the lack of a better one. You need to understand the whole thing. You need to not be afraid of understanding the whole thing. I think that especially if you are in a team that's playing with innovation, with something new, there's nothing of the sort of, this is not my scope, or this is something that we cannot do, or this was never done before. There's no such thing. So when I started at Tier, the team was experimenting with a platform, sorry, and it was going south. It was not working well. And then there was this question on, should we insist on this or should we change? But if we change, we are starting almost from scratch, because we need to do a lot of things again. And this is also another thing about working with innovation. One thing is working on what you know, what you've done before, everyone has done before, and then you just keep on going. There's almost like a formula to this, not wanting to simplify too much. But when you're talking about innovation, you have to also give the space for people to fail and to understand we want the best outcome that we can have here, because we want to understand how can we foster this as a culture moving forward. If we don't have the best outcome, and if people don't feel that they can fail and that they can come to their manager and say, yeah, we need to start over, then we're not going to get the best outcome, right? So we need courageous people, we need proactive people, we need people that think out of the box, that don't put a box around themselves, and that will really reach to any point of the company to get that job done.
So that I'm going to ask a leading question there. Then, so you've identified having a willingness to fail, or at least the willingness to try and not do it great the first time, and keep going, the persistence to keep going. What are some other elements of a successful culture for innovation, in your opinion? If we're going to create communities, what do we need to be intentionally fostering?
So learning and growing. I'm simplifying the words, but there's so much into that. Think of a human being growing and learning. There's so much pain and so much uncomfortness, some discomfort, sorry, better wording, around this. And people need to embrace it. People need to embrace failure. People need to embrace discomfort. People need to embrace learning. They need to embrace sharing. They need to be ready to do things in a repetitive way. First time, second time, third time. They also need to be humble. I think that was another thing that helped a lot this team, was when it started to fail the first time, then I went to them and said, okay, we are going to try this again. What do you need to be more comfortable and more confident that we are moving towards the same direction? Do we need external experts? Do we need external companies? Do you need validation? What do you need? Do you need training? Do you need, what type of information do you need? And then we need to get together and understand what are the things that can give the team the confidence that they are actually in the right path. And with this, then I move forward. And I think that it's been really successful. I am super happy that we changed paths. We got to a better point way faster this time. And yeah, I think it was definitely the right decision.
I love it, because that's innovation within the organization. You're co-creating that organization with the people that are the recipients, but also the creators of value. It's like, that's a double whammy there. I have run over the time. And so I apologize for doing that to everybody. But thanks to all the speakers and for all the hard work that they put in. It's a great first episode. I'm looking forward to the next one. If you want to tune back in or come in and say hi in person June 9th for the next episode, check out the meetup, sign up for it. It will be all about creating sustainability with growth. The employee of the future wants a purpose in their role. They don't want to make the world a worse place by doing their job better. It's one of the nice things about working at Vinted is I get to feel like everything we do to make things better, we don't do anything if it doesn't have sustainability in the process, in the value that we're delivering. So everything we do makes the world better. I think that a lot of organizations are looking for that. And we're going to be talking about how you can do that within your organization, creating sustainability with growth. Look at the meetup page. You can volunteer as a speaker and have to sit through me interrogating you and introducing you. I'm sorry about that. Or contact one of the people from the meetup groups or on LinkedIn. The Berlin Tech Leads is now also present in the German techjobs.de WAC community, or / for you young kids out there. So https whack germantechjobs.de WAC community. So I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. People who are in the chats today, I want you to be on the screen the next time, and really help us all learn together. Let's bring all of your learnings to the community. If you've done something and it hasn't worked, why let somebody else try and do the same thing? Why not help them do it a little bit better the next time? We're all friends here. So thank you and good night. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your weekend.